Welcome to Profound Conversations, a dynamic broadcast platform focused on building healthy communities. In an ever-evolving world, new ideas and transformative ways of being are the lights at the end of the tunnel. Please join us as we participate in critical and profound conversations impacting humanity.
Welcome to Profound Conversations, a place where we have conversations about how to be and to become better. We are here with a strategist, an expert, a thinker, and a doer, Fatima Linda Howard. Welcome to Profound Conversations as we continue our discussion about DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, and how do we deconstruct it to understand what we need to do next. So we were talking about this idea of DEI and how people have misunderstood it and continue to misunderstand it as something of a handout or some kind of something that people are just given because they exist, and not recognize that it's in response to people being given things because they exist and being denied of other things that they actually need to have. There have been some organizations and businesses that have jumped on the bandwagon, and they have decided that they are no longer, and when I say the bandwagon, or I said believe the hype, the federal government, the federal bandwagon, and they've said that they are no longer going to honor diversity, equity, inclusion. Businesses like Target and Walmart, but also there have been businesses such as Costco and others who have said that we're not going to go that road. What are your thoughts about these businesses, and are there any other businesses that we should consider that are not being very friendly when it comes to DEI? But I know I mentioned Target and Walmart. I know those two stand out for me. But let's go with that. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I think that if you have businesses that are saying at this early stage in the conversation that we're no longer going to honor it, I don't think they were ever honoring it to begin with. And that I do know as a consultant, because I've talked to organizations and, where they may have hired a DEI person, and a DEI person, reached out to me about possibly working with their organization in some capacity. And I would ask a series of questions. And after answering those questions, I would conclude that the organization wasn't really committed. They thought that that's what they needed to do because that's what the climate was saying doing, but they weren't really committed. And the reason why I say they weren't committed, because oftentimes they hired DEI officers, but didn't really empower them. Didn't give them the budgets that they needed in order to effectuate change. Some of them hired DEI individuals that they didn't hire them at the right level. I've had people, approach me. I've been working for myself now for about 15 years, but I've had some conversations regarding employment when everybody was trying to hire DEI officers, and I've had people approach me where I was going to be reporting to this person that reported to that person that reported to the CEO. And I said, no, if you're serious about DEI, you got to hire someone at the right level, because the changes is going to happen through the conversations with the executive team. That's when people will know that you're serious. So I think that you had a lot of organizations that basically played lip service, and now they're looking at this as an opportunity that we don't have to do that anymore. So those that are in the conversations at this stage about pulling out was never in.
So you mean to tell me that these people were just simply talking, but they didn't really mean it? They were trying to show a good face? Come on now, you that can't be the case. These are some good folks. They're good people. They're putting our products on the counter. They have put up. They fought about having the Black Annie in their store. They have put various people's products. Tabitha Brown. They put the products in there. They put T-shirts about sweatshirts about Black History Month. You mean to tell me that they simply were giving us lip service and now they're showing us who they really are? Wow. Well,
I think if someone is in the if this if there is no legal requirement for them to pull back their focus on DEI, and they're saying at this early stage, and I'm saying early stage because we're talking a week and a half in. If a week and a
Mm.
half in, they're already saying we're throwing in the towel, I'm saying they were never in it.
You better
And
believe them when they tell you the first time. There it is. When people show
that's
you who
right.
they are, believe them the first time. Go ahead.
And so I think that that's one group. And oftentimes I would ask the question about I say people have to put their money where their mouth is. So I would ask budgeting questions. How much have you allocated to this? How much have you allocated in terms of resources, staff? And answering those questions, I would know that they weren't serious. I had I had a one organization that the diversity officer reached out to me to do some education for some of their team members, and we went back and forth, and then she said that the CFO wanted to meet with me first, and I said, why does the CFO need to meet with me? And I said, if they hired you to be the diversity officer,
Mm,
why does
mm.
he need to approve who you're bringing in? And so first I said I wasn't going to meet with him. And then I said, well, I will meet for 30 minutes. But anytime after that, then I'm going on an hourly rate. Because so this was saying to me that they hired someone but did not empower her.
Mm.
Because there's no reason why the CFO should be in a conversation with the person who's being hired to do DEI education.
There it is, right?
So I'm saying there were signs that where and I know a lot of people that are diversity officers, and a lot of them are really frustrated because they're sincere about what they want to do, but they weren't given the power or the resources to get it done. So you get little token things done. Now you have some organizations that's all in. Um, they hire at the right level, they put resources towards it. It's a part of the mission statement. The leadership sees the win in it. It's not just about this is a good thing to do. This is good for business. This is good for morale. It's good for retention. Like they see all the benefit. It mitigates the risks related to legal actions and discrimination. So you have some organizations that see all of that, and I commend them. And then you have those who, as I said, were never really in it.
I love it because you also not only said that they were not in it from the very beginning, if they are willing to jump out, or that their dedication to it is questionable given their particular actions at this time. But the other part about it is that did they put the money into the space so that it could be successful, or were they simply giving lip service? And so that second part, and then thirdly, were people empowered to be able to actualize their particular position, or were they just simply given what's called a straw ball? So they just showed up, but really they were a figurehead so that the company could look good and it was good window dressing, but not substantive. There have been
Mm.
companies like Costco and J.P. Morgan and Apple who say that they will continue their diversity efforts. And so I know that there was an initiative led by Reverend Al Sharpton to go, and so others have gone and do a buy-in at Costco. And that's one action that people are taking, is simply going in and purchasing. Uh, in this moment, I contend that we have, as we've had in those other moments that I've mentioned about the Black Wall Street, others, we're at a critical juncture where we can actually move into a space where we are owners and that we are empowering one another to be successful. What are some of the things that we can do right now, in addition to having buy-ins at Costco, that can further empower us in this moment where we've been forced to make a decision to not do business in certain places?
Yeah, well, I think that that is one thing in terms of speaking with our dollars. I mean, we've had those campaigns in the past, and I think that those are good things. I think it's not a one pronged strategy, but I think that it's a multi pronged strategy. And I'll name a few things, but I'm sure that those listening to this can think of others. So I don't consider myself, that I'm an expert in this. I'm living it like everyone else. And through living it, there are some things that, that I start to see as potential strategies. And I'll just name a few. One is to really make that shift from that institutional dependency to like community led solutions. And that kind of aligns with that do for self, but it's establishing those community driven business incubators. It's also things like um, looking at how do we begin to fund our own businesses and our own initiatives, looking at alternative funding models, leveraging like entrepreneurship. And so for me, as I mentioned, I I started working for myself about 15, a little over 15 years ago. And then I remember when I decided to leave my job, a lot of people said to me, "How could you leave a good job, a good paying job, in a bad economy?" And so there was a lot of pressure for me to stay on the job. And my brother said to me, which was very impactful, he said, "Don't follow the advice of people that don't come from your value system."
Mm.
And he told me to do a prayer for guidance. And he said, "And when you get that guidance, you follow it." And that's what I did. I did that prayer for guidance and I quit the job. And I have been now, as I said, self-employed for over 15 years. And I'm not saying that it was all uphill. I mean, with being self-employed, it sometimes it's a little bit of a roller coaster ride. But I read this book a while back called The Dip. And essentially, the dip is like what makes the difference between a successful entrepreneur and one that is not successful is one who can ride the dip. And and I'm saying this to say, in terms of from my own experience, that yes, sometimes it may seem a little frightening and we may hit some rough patches, but understanding that that's what happens in business, and you ride that dip, and it's like a roller coaster. You may go down, but you can also come back up with a lot of force. And then you kind of putz along and you go down a little bit more, and then you kind of come back up even higher. And the more that we can begin to get comfortable and know that we have family support and community support to get us through the dip, we can start to think more about how do we build these things, how do we build these things ourselves. And then and a lot of this is being politically driven. So how do we invest in things that allow us to have more political influence? How do we begin to influence legislation? Because we don't actually have to be in office to influence legislation, because legislation oftentimes is influenced by lobbyists and public demand. So just kind of thinking about those type of things. How do we reclaim the narrative, and reclaiming education, and how we educate ourselves. So I think that there are a lot of things that we can do, but I think this is an opportunity for us to say, what new strategies do we need to put in place? And I'm doing a few off the top of my head from my own kind of lived experiences, but I'm sure there's plenty out there. And I think us coming together and beginning to have some of these real critical conversations, like the conversation we're having now, but to be able to have some of these real critical conversations about how do we move from that institutional dependency and reacting to the political culture?
Are you able to speak on those things that you're actually able to do at this time? You're saying that there's some things that you are doing, right? Are you able to speak on those things?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on it on some,
One
on
of
some
them,
level.
yes.
Yeah. So as I said, one of the things was the shift that I had some time back from from the self-employment standpoint. But the other thing is that even when I started to think about where did I want to live, I just recently moved and purchased a new home. But I was thinking in terms of in selecting where I wanted to be, thinking about community. I was thinking about being in a place where I thought that it's conducive to me building community, because I believe that that's going to be very, very important. And and not to put myself in a place where I'm isolated, or in a place where I'm surrounded by people that I can't build community with. So that was like very important to me. And it's just thinking of how do we start to build for that future. It's also the same thing in working on it at a family level, is looking at how to be able to empower other family members, and how to gather more so that we can have these critical conversations and be able. So that is happening. And I'm also like looking to have some more, like I ended up getting a home probably bigger than what I needed just for me, but I didn't think about it as just for me. Thinking about a place where people can gather, where I can start to be able to have some of these conversations, and having some of these mastermind discussions, and being able to invite groups of people over, so we can start to have these smaller conversations, because the conversations don't have to necessarily start as a big gathering. Sometimes those conversations start with two, three, four, five people in a room together.
I like the idea that the conversations can start in small ways. Your brother gave you some profound advice by saying, "Don't listen to people." Say that again. Who don't share your same values. And I often say the idea that we have to stop listening to people who are too afraid to even actualize their own vision, let alone understand
Right.
your vision and what you have for yourself, right? And so that's a small conversation that leads to something else. So I love it. It may start small. However, you created this opportunity by which individuals can come into a space and to have these incubators, not necessarily in the sense of a business incubator, but to incubate an idea, just an idea among themselves and take action. This is that time, I think, is for us to be critical about the actions that we can take. And you've given us some nuggets of things to think about. Is if we have the business, how do we begin to tie the businesses together and create something that functions like some of these bigger engines that operate, that deliver to your house every day, right? There are
Right.
ways to create those opportunities, because if we're creating the seasonings, if we're creating the athleisure wear, if we're creating the other things, if we are involved in AI from another perspective, and we creating the various platforms, we have the capacity to make those things happen. We know that not only have we been an oppressed people in a space, but we know that the innovation in this space has come through the genius of African people. Like we talk about, how did people get to the moon? There's a whole movie about black women mapping out how to get to the moon. We know the internet is a invention of a person of African descent, in Magwali. We know that these various things, if Carolina Gold was rice, and rice was the thing that saved the country after the civil war in this country, if you can have a thing called a civil war, but it saved the country after that, because they got Africans from the Gambia and other Senegambia regions too, because they knew how to grow rice, move rice through salt water and filter it out to make it fresh water to grow rice. And that became Carolina Gold. It saved the country. But before there was Carolina Gold, there was the cotton. Cotton was king. That also came from the genius of African people to know how to take cotton, not only grow it, but make it into fabric. We see that this genius has been here for generations. We know that George Washington Carver talked about how to rotate crops and save the country, rotating crops. So we're talking about over and over and over again. The economic development of this country has been predicated on the genius of people, not simply talking about the slave labor, but the genius of how to engage in crop growing. But also, in closing out this one, we know that the cattle industry in this country was done by African men. And here's how we know it, because white men who involved in the cattle industry were called cattlemen or steermen, and those who did the labor were called cowboys. And so white men were never called boys. Therefore, we understand that if they were called cowboys, they had to have been Africans. We also know that the longhorn itself came from the continent of Africa, but also what people cooked along the way. This idea of Southern cooking is not Southern cooking at all. It's African cuisine, it's African cooking that's done in the South, because that's where Africans have lived. You have Italian restaurants, you have Chinese restaurants, but we cannot have African food, right? So the idea of Southern cooking is also an African phenomenon. So what we see then is that a population has how to sustain itself economically, how to sustain itself with your genius. Hip hop music, so forth and so on, is African genius in effect. Jazz music, and so all these things exist. And now we're at an opportunity where if people want to turn their backs, I love what you're saying. If they have turned their backs, if they're turning away from it, if they've underfunded this stuff, then it's time for population to say, listen, what can we do for ourselves? That is a Marcus Garvey message. That is a brother was recently pardoned, right, by the president for some trumped up charges. But that was what he was saying, do for self. That is what Elijah Muhammad talked about, do for self. That's what others have talked about over the years. How do you do for self? And you're saying some of the same things. Points. You gave us some things to think about. You gave us this idea of setting up these small pods. How do we set up the small pod? How have you done it, rather? And what have you seen come out of these small pods that you've created?
Well, I've set them up a lot with what I would consider like my inner circle. And a lot of it is around social, start out around social. We like social, we like food. I happen to like to cook. So having a space where I can cook and invite people over, people are definitely open to coming. So I think that that's one of the places where a lot of conversations begin. And and I've had where I've had to call friends to support business initiatives, and they put in resources to fund it. I've had people reach out to me in the same way, and just developing those networks of trusted people, and also doing what we can do to make other people in our network successful. And sometimes we got to do that work, because oftentimes things like jealousy and envy come into place, and we don't want to help other people be successful. I want to help everybody around me be successful, because I may need to pick up the phone and call one or two of those people.
That's right. That's right.
And if I don't have anybody, if my lights are getting ready to get turned off and I don't have anybody in my circle that can help me with light bill money, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
And that's on a smaller scale. But sometimes we have, there are a lot of people that don't have anyone in their circle that they can call and borrow $100 from. And that $100 might be the thing to help them keep their lights on. And if you don't have any lights, that starts a whole nother chain of things to happen.
There it is.
And now you don't have the phone in order for somebody to call you for a business or a job opportunity. But there are a lot of people that don't have people in their circle, because we're not doing the work to help each other be in a position to help. Now that's on a smaller scale, but we want to be able to pick up the phone and call people and ask for large sums of money, the sum of money that it takes to get a business initiative off the ground or a community project off the ground. So yes, we have to do that. We have to do that work. And I think that starts, I think that work starts at a personal level, that people to get to know who you are, and that are, those are the things that start to begin to build trust. And so I do think we got to do that work at a personal level. That, keeping personal and business separate, no. Um, I think that those lines have to be crossed. Now, if you're doing business with people you don't trust, you might want to keep it separate. But I'm
That's
suggesting
true.
don't do business with people you don't trust.
There it
We have to
is.
be able to get into those communities of trust where we trust each other.
Mm,
And
that's
so
it.
oftentimes we get that whole thing of leaving, I don't expose myself at work. That's because we're working in an environment where we don't trust people.
There it is. I just, you bring up a point. One point is about leave the jealousy behind, and jealousy is tied in large parts to insecurities, right? That that we don't believe in ourselves. So I love what you said about dropping the jealousy, believe in yourself. I don't believe that anybody can take any idea I have and run with it. So I'm not even afraid of sharing an idea because you can't do what I do because the vision was
Right.
given to me to do it. So let's just share and see how we can blow it up. But secondly, you talked about the issue of trust. That means we have to get to a space of trust of one another. That I trust that you have my best interest at heart, and we get to the level of trust, as you said, through relationship. That as we engage in relationship, that is where we begin to build this idea of trust. And relationship can be built through the things that we do to sustain ourselves, as a meal. And many times, sitting down, eating together, breaking bread, and then having a discussion. Those things are critical to a population to be able to live, expand, and to continue to exist, to extend. And we have to get some of that. I love that. When we come together in our various circles in this time, this is a thought for us to think about. When we come together in our various circles to have these discussions, how do we begin to direct the discussion such a way that we are now taking ownership to do for ourselves? Is it about building and having a business plan? Is it about having infrastructure? Is it about having a good ideas? It's about having some action steps, an action agenda. Is it about having a vision board? What do we do? We come together, we have the talk. Your brother said, listen, you got the idea. He knew. He knew his sister who he was talking to. And I'm learning right now, like this right here, you don't want to mess with this. You don't want this smoke. But he knew that all you needed was just to say, go and do it because the fire was already lit. For others who are trying to get, we're trying to chip the stones to get the flint to get started. What do we do to get started in these various circles so that we can begin to build and do for ourselves?
Yeah, I don't know if it's one solution. I think you threw out a lot of things, all of which can work. And I incorporate a lot of different things for different things that I'm working on. Like one of my projects, I moved to Morocco for 2 years, and I just came back a few months ago. And so when I came back, I said, okay, this is the next chapter in my life. And it would have been easy for me to jump in and say, okay, what am I doing, to bring in money. So I actually stepped back for a minute and said, no, I need some time to kind of adjust, get back here. And I spent probably about a week just working on a vision board. And this vision board is 3 panels, and it
Oh,
addresses um, a number of aspects of my life. And I said, what do I want to work on at a spiritual level? And then, what do I want to work on in terms of relationship, health? Where do I want to live? And one of the things that I did on my vision board is I said, what kind of home do I want? What do I want to experience in that home? What do I want that home to be? And I put that on a vision board. And one day I woke up and said, I think this is where I want to live now. And I went out, looked at some places one week, went out, looked at some places the next week, only looked at a few places. And I walked into a place, and it was the place on my vision board.
hmm.
And I knew it was the home. And I started to put everything in action to make that happen. And I had people that helped me get that done, just in terms of advice and all of those things in order to kind of move through this process in record time. But if I had not thought about what I wanted and had not actually put that on a vision board, I wouldn't have recognized it when I saw it.
Mm.
And I might have said, well, let me look at some more places. I mean, the realtor was shocked. I looked at the place in the evening and then I said, make an offer. And she said, you sure? Because I only went out with her one day. She said, you sure? And I said, I'm sure. She said, well, I think we're going to have to be pretty aggressive to get this place. I said, then aggress on. That's my house. But I wouldn't have moved with confidence had I not done the work ahead of time and had I not created that vision board. Now, other times I do a very detailed business plan. And that works as well. So I think that sometimes it's a matter of where you are in your life. Sometimes it's it's um, it's what projects you're working on. I've done a really detailed business plan, shared it with a friend because I wanted him to invest. He didn't even look at the business plan. He says, I don't need to see this. Do you think it's going to work? And I said, yes. And he wired money in my account.
Mm.
So this is somebody that didn't need a business plan. Now you go to Wells Fargo asking for a loan, you're going to need that business plan. So
That's it.
so I think it really just depends. It's not a one size fit all for all situations and for all people. I think the individual and the group needs to think about what it is that is going to be the most effective tool to move the dream forward.
You mentioned earlier about this uniprong attack, and I say often we cannot have a uniprong attack to a multifaceted phenomenon. And so you just actually hit it by saying that it depends on the situation, the condition, and the desired outcome, right? And so the vision board works in one way. Without the vision, you can't manifest anything. And I love what you said about even without the proper vision, you don't know you don't know you don't know that you've actually gotten to where you're supposed to be because you haven't listened to the vision. The vision
Right.
comes from a higher source anyway, right? But then you also said that there are times when you strategize, you put steps down, and you talk about how it works and how it won't work. The business plan conversation. Who's the competitor, and how are we at advantaged by being this business in this location at this time, and what are some of the threats to the business? Right. That's wonderful. And some people need to see that you thought about what you're doing. And others just say the fact that I feel the energy coming from you.
Right.
And Fatima, I can clearly feel, uh, experience the energy and fire that comes from you. And so if you said it can be done, if you said we can walk on water, I'm stepping right there because Fatima said it, we're going. And we're gonna walk on this water today. So I actually thank you so much for sharing. And there's so much more that we need to unpack for our people. And how can our people can continue to interact with you? I know you have a LinkedIn space, and your book. I think we need to get a copy of it. Is it Crescent Over Crossroads? Is that it?
Pressing over crossroads. So reaching out to me is very easy. Just think with Linda Howard. I have a website that's with Linda Howard. You can reach me at LH at with Linda Howard. And also, my book, Crescent Over Crossroads, is available on Amazon. You can get additional information. I do have a website as well for the book, Crescent Over Crossroads. So yes, reach out to me at any time. I look forward to hearing thoughts from people, to be invited on other shows, and certainly available for the consulting work. But one thing I want to say to everyone before we depart, because I talked about the vision board and the business plan, And I think one thing, it's important to not have that analysis paralysis.
Mm.
So sometimes you just got to move. And people that are surround me often hear me say that I'll take the approach. I take the approach of Apple. Apple get the product out there, then they send out the updates to say we're fixing the bugs. But if you
Mm.
wait to make something perfect, oftentimes you don't begin. So I say just begin.
Mm.
And it's okay to begin and not be perfect and start to tweak it as you're going along. So to encourage people to get moving is I'm saying it doesn't need to be perfect. Just start moving, just start doing something, just begin.
Just begin, just get it started, right? And when you start in the
Start.
direction of your vision, because the vision doesn't come from the source within, the vision comes from the source within. And so when the vision comes, people think that it's my idea. No, the fundamental question is, where did the idea come from in the first place? Because you just simply are a conduit. And you're very clear about this. If you are a conduit, then if the finger of the divine points you in a direction, then the hand is going to make a way. You say leap and the net will appear. I said, if you say let's walk on water, I'm saying let's go. I'm right behind you. I'm right in front of you. I'm right beside you. We got this. That is important. The important part is that not to engage in paralysis of analysis, but to understand that if the vision has come, then take the steps to actualize it. That's the risk. There are no wonderful opportunities without risk. Every last one of them. As a matter of fact, you mentioned your book based on Amazon. Amazon founder was indebted to individuals for 3 or 4 years, making no money whatsoever. And people should continue to believe in it. Now it's second in the world, right, for revenue generating. So it's some even say first. So these things happen. We just have to move on it. We have been speaking to Fatima Linda Howard. Look her up on With Linda. Is that correct? With Linda?
With Linda Howard.
With Linda Howard. And Crescent Over Crossroads is the title of her book. A person who has dedicated her life to being one to educate individuals, to give support to marginalized populations, to strive around this idea of multicultural competency in healthcare and wellness. We did not even touch her work around healthcare and wellness. And she's been on panels on Capitol Hill addressing wellness initiatives for underserved populations and speaking to health club industry leaders. This is very, very, very critical because we need to continue the conversation, because without your health, there is no wealth and there is no prosperity. And so you are tackling these issues of compliance and ethics and best practices and so forth. And these are things that we need to be about the business of doing. You said that we don't have to be a politician to be one to have power and make a difference. So we stand firm on knowing that we already have the power. We have what we need to succeed. There's an excuse not to produce. We simply have to take a step and move on the vision that we've been given. Thank you, Fatima Linda Howard. This is Profound Conversations, and we are here to facilitate us being and becoming better. Thank you.
Thank you for joining our Profound Conversation. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our podcast and then gift this information to a friend or family member using the share button. You can find our show on all social media platforms as well as on our website at profoundconvos.com. Profound Conversations executive producers are the Muslim Life Planning Institute, a national community building organization whose mission is to establish pathways to lifelong learning and healthy communities at the local, national, and global level. The Profound Conversations podcast is produced by Erica Christie. Programming is produced by the Aliyah Network. Thank you for your support.